Toxicity can be enhanced by the amount of surfactant. And then also you have to think about the altitude at which this material is being sprayed, because the higher you fly, the greater the dispersal, the wider the dispersal. You cannot keep that material that you're really blasting over the surface of the earth right in a straight, clean ribbon or strip. That's impossible. This material is going to blow around.
Mi nombre es Tulio Santander.
My name is Tulio Santander. I was living on a farm in the Putumayo, on a farm over there where they fumigated everything I had. They fumigated my crops of bananas. Bananas not for sale, but for my family's subsistence. I have a wife, I have kids, and they also fumigated the yucca. I had fish.
I know now there is concern because there seem to be more skin problems in people who've been exposed to the spraying, who were there when they were actually sprayed upon.
We're engaged in a policy now of aerial fumigation, which I think is a human rights violation, to put it bluntly. I mean, planes are flying up high and spraying, these dangerous chemicals, and not only on coca plants, but on legal crops. They're spraying wells where people get their water to drink. The spray is hitting, young children, babies, pregnant women, elderly.
Well, those are criticisms we've heard a lot, but I don't know that that's entirely true. I would have to look at that more closely to respond fully to it now.
20 to 30 meters up, ideally.
They often spray just 20 to 30 meters up in the industrial-sized fields. It is true that particularly when they're spraying heroin or poppy crops, where you're in a more mountainous area, that sometimes they have to fly at higher elevations.
The Monsanto Chemical Corporation was commissioned by the U.S. State Department to provide a defoliant that could be spread on large areas of forest from a safe altitude above insecure territories. The result was Roundup Ultra, a modification of the commercially available Roundup weed killer with a new formulation which has not been disclosed. With rain and humidity, these deadly chemicals are running into the water supply of the entire Amazon basin, an issue that affects not only Colombia, but parts of Ecuador, Peru, and Brazil as well.
I have, however, not seen any credible scientific evidence, none, that has suggested that this has a harmful environmental impact.
One of the earlier studies discovered that Roundup or glyphosate actually interferes with enzyme systems in the thyroid, in the brain, the liver, and the pancreas. And one of the studies actually showed that glyphosate caused tumors in the thyroid and also in the pancreas and in the Leydig cells, or the testicles. These are the cells that are critical for sperm production in the male.
I mean, we've been through that before where, we use different herbicides, and, I think of Vietnam vets and Agent Orange, and everybody's told that they're fine, that there's no problem, and then later on we find that it's highly correlated to cancer or terrible illness.
Look at the children and the grandchildren of the people who were there, who were exposed. It's a horror story. And we found out that dioxin had a lot of effects on a lot of different systems. But 40 years later, are we going to wait 40 years before we get the truth out of this?
The people in Colombia have every right to be concerned, and I think we have to do it differently.
A few years ago, the RAND Corporation, a very conservative think tank, does a lot of consulting for the military, was commissioned by the Army and by the U.S. Drug Czar's office to do a study called Controlling Cocaine.
They compared several methods of dealing with the drug problem. One method is prevention and treatment. That was by far the most cost-effective. The next one was police measures at home. That, I think, was about 1/7 as cost-effective as prevention and treatment. The next was border interdiction. That was 1/11 as effective. The next was out-of-country operations, like fumigation in Colombia. There the ratio was 23-1 in favor of prevention and treatment. That's just in terms of cost effectiveness.
So we are pursuing the least cost-effective method of reducing drug use in the United States, if that is truly what we're concerned about.
It is really strange that both the Colombian and American governments focus their anti-drug efforts on the periphery of the problem and not on its center of gravity. The center of gravity of the problem is the drug traffickers, and they are not attacked.
While the policy of aerial spraying has proven largely ineffective, the production of cocaine has actually doubled over the last 10 years. The question then becomes, why spend billions of dollars on a proven failure and not on domestic prevention rehabilitation programs?
Originally, when the Colombian president came to the United States with the idea for Plan Colombia, it was not primarily a military plan. It was to find alternative crops, it was for economic development. But when it got to the United States, a heavy military stamp was put on it by the Pentagon. So now we have a situation where out of $1.7 billion over the next few years, 80% of it will go for military purposes.
Not a single moment was Plan Colombia discussed directly by the Colombian Congress. Major decisions were made by the executive branch and by the U.S. State Department. That was the style of the negotiation.
To give a sense of the priorities in the Congress, one of the biggest debates when Plan Colombia was debated on the floor was how many helicopters should be built in Texas at Bell Helicopter Textron, how many would be built in Connecticut at Sikorsky Helicopter. So rather than debating, you know, is a military solution to the drug war possible, what will be the impacts on the people of Colombia, they were arguing over the money. You know, is the company in my state going to get it? Is the company in Texas going to get it? So it was sort of one of the less dignified moments in American foreign policy debates.
Not a single European country and not a Latin American country has openly and wholeheartedly supported our approach in Colombia. They see it as too militarized, and they see it as a failure as far as drug policy goes. That is an indication that there must be something wrong with the overall approach.
It's not so much an aid program as another way to subsidize the military-industrial complex in the United States.
In this case, much of the money is going to end up with helicopter companies. Sikorsky, which makes the Black Hawk helicopter, will be getting almost $250 million, and Bell Helicopter, which makes the upgrades for the Huey, is going to get somewhere in the neighborhood of $100 million.
Besides channeling billions of U.S. taxpayers' dollars into U.S. arms-making corporations, the State Department has resorted to sending private mercenaries instead of regular American military personnel to carry out missions in Colombia.
There are not U.S. military personnel engaged in any kind of military operations in the country. The contractor situation is an interesting one, and in many ways it's not particularly a military issue.
When you use private military contractors, you don't have the same kinds of oversight, the same kind of accountability that you have when you use GIs.
The reason we are outsourcing this war, privatizing this war, is because we don't have the kind of public support in this country to put U.S. military service personnel in the line of fire. And so we're resorting to the private sector to carry out these functions.
So this is a under-the-radar kind of war, a little secret war that the United States is using its taxpayer dollars to engage in.
A lot of Americans don't realize what a substantial military effort the United States is making in Colombia, but actually Colombia is the third largest recipient of U.S. military aid after Egypt and Israel.
There's always been a concern in providing assistance to Colombia because they've been in effect a civil war for 30 years.
Much older than the current drug war situation, Colombia's civil strife is as old as the country itself. Originating in colonial racism and oligarchy, The social conflict develops as Colombia evolves into an industrial